Lesson 4, Function as a Service. Function as a service may appear identical to platform as a service. Function as a service is a category of cloud computing. However, it does differ from platform as a service in the way that it is implemented. Quite often, function as a service can offer the same services as platform as a service, but it's done in a different way. Function as a service provides application development environments in the form typically of microservices, so therefore the cost is much lower. Function as a service differs from platform as a service in the way that it provides dynamic services or dynamic computing on demand. Customers only pay for the time that the environment is used. This differs from cloud computing and infrastructure as a service greatly because in this model, in the function as a service model, customers only pay for the time the environment's actually used. When the customer closes out access, the customer does not incur any charges. Again, this is different from a typical cloud computing model where the subscription is done on some kind of a monthly or time basis, and whether the customer is accessing the environment or not, the customer is still charged. So function as a service is offered really in runtime and only when the customer is using it. Function as a service only really provides the processing of data. There is no storage of data that's part of a function as a service. And if data does need to be stored by the cloud provider, that would obviously be an extra cost. With function as a service, the environment stops during idle time, and customers do not incur any costs during this time. Function as a service is quite often referred to as serverless computing. Function as a service shields the customer from underutilizing the cloud servers. And underutilization can be one downside of cloud computing because as long as that environment is up and running, the customer is paying for it. However, though, there is a factor where every time a customer does wish to access a function as a service instance, it must be brought up. So therefore, it can be slow at times. If a runtime environment is stopped and a request is made, the environment must start up. So there can be that lag time. The startup time is generally only a few seconds, but it's not immediate. And so often the customer has to evaluate some of the trade-offs. Some examples of function as a service include Amazon Web Services Lambda, Google Functions, and Azure Functions. Until now, we've talked about a lot of the advantages of cloud computing, and there are many, many advantages. But just like many things in business, there's not one right or wrong way to go. There are just right ways that make sense to a particular business context. And often there are trade-offs. So there are, for all of the advantages that a customer gets from cloud computing, there are some downsides. The fact that cloud computing services are offered by a third party makes a firm dependent on the cloud provider. Security can be an issue if the cloud provider does not take the necessary steps to guard data. And data is now out of control of the customer and is really under the control of the cloud provider. Often mobility is an issue when it comes to cloud computing. There can be limited ability to move away from a cloud computing provider if indeed the firm wishes to move away, only because the data is on the data center of the cloud provider. So these are just some of the disadvantages, but quite often the advantages greatly outweigh any disadvantages from uh, of cloud computing, and firms really need to have a plan to manage the disadvantages.